Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
Well, thanks, Scott. Yes, today I'm excited to have Dr. Patrick Porter. You know, in late 2020, Patrick Porter was honored, was the honored recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Interdisciplinary Association of Functional Neurosciences and Rehabilitation, and for good reason. Over his career, spanning more than 3 decades, Dr. Porter has been on the cutting edge of brainwave entertainment technology. He was the co-developer of the first personal light and sound brain training machine, voted Best New Gadget of the Year at the 1989 Consumer Electronics Show, and later developed one of the largest and most popular self-help franchises. He's since become a highly sought-after expert within the neuroscience and personal improvement industries. Dr. Porter is widely recognized as an award-winning author, educator, consultant, researcher, entrepreneur, and speaker. His newest brain training platform, BrainTap, is distinctly designed to activate the brain's neuroplasticity. The BrainTap headset uses light and sound technology in combination with Dr. Porter's proprietary guided visualization audio sessions to help people achieve brain fitness, overcome stress, lose weight, stop smoking, manage pain, accelerate learning, enjoy superb sleep, and make any number of lifestyle improvements. And I, for one, I can vouch for that. I use it quite a bit. And in fact, in my house, it sometimes is a problem for the fact that my wife wants to use it, I want to use it, and I have 2 teenage girls that want to use it. And I think one of the biggest things is helping people sleep, superb sleep. So Dr. Porter, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jason. It's great to be here.
So Dr. Porter, tell me a little bit, how is it that from a young man trying to decide what he wanted to be, to growing up to being an inventor of this incredible technology? What are some key steps along the way?
Well, for me, I was, my first book, Awaken the Genius, actually tells the whole story. I was one of those kids that was always getting in trouble. I was held back in 2nd grade. I was told I really wasn't that smart. I wasn't very good at school. I was a great artist. I got art scholarships and I could draw and I was creative. I was in my head, but I didn't really like numbers. And then my dad, the church actually came over and helped my dad go to a relaxation seminar. And when he did that, he stopped drinking. It was like magic for him. He realized that the reason he was drinking was try to relax. And of course, drinking doesn't really relax your nervous system. It actually makes it worse. And he was a very chronic alcoholic. But after that, he became a seminar leader in a process called the Silva method, which I'm Catholic. So it was brought up. It was something they did through the Catholic Church. And then my dad became an instructor. And so basically, since I've been about 12 years old, I've been going to conferences and setting up chairs and helping my dad do his thing early on. And then, of course, I was never going to do what dad did because, you know, as a kid, you go, nah, I'm not going to, dad can do that thing. I'm going to do something else. So I went to school for electronics because I really, I went from being someone who wasn't very good at school to being an honor roll student, 3-sport captain. And I think it all has to do with him teaching me through technology-driven meditation. They used something called the isochronic tones with this method. So they played this tone in the background and it put you into a state of relaxation where you could visualize better, you could get rid of your stress. And then things kind of, the stars kind of aligned, and I was at an event in Vegas and I met up with the company Light and Sound Research. And that whole story is in another book that we don't have to go into now called Miracles, because it was actually kind of a miracle. The company actually, because I kept going back there, I formed a relationship with this group because I loved it. I didn't have any money, but it was $10,000 for this big piece of equipment and I wanted to use it. And while I was going back and forth, the inventor actually passed away. He was back in Arkansas, and they were crying, they didn't know what to do. And I said, well, what are you going to do from here? Because I'm trying to keep track of this device. This before cell phones and internet and all of this in the 80s. And they said, well, we're going to go to Phoenix. We have some family in Scottsdale. And I said, you know what? I have an office in Scottsdale. I said, why don't you bring it on by? And I said, my background, I have a degree in electronics. We could reverse engineer this, because the guy didn't leave anything for his employees. They didn't know how to build it. And so they brought it into the office. We played around with, tinkered with it. And one of the prototypes was a little tiny device that we nicknamed the MC square after Einstein, because it basically, we believed that it wasn't 2 + 2. It was like 2 + 2 is 8 when you started using this technology to relax with. And I was just testing out the circuit for the bigger unit, the bigger 10,000 unit. And what happened was we started buying them. There was a company called Radio Shack, for those out there that remember that company. We would go to Radio Shack and we'd buy all the parts. We'd go back to the back room, we'd build them. And there was something called an EEPROM chip. We built everything from scratch in the back room. We'd sell 10 to 15 of them a week or a month, whatever time it took. And we just keep building them. And pretty soon we had such a volume that we never did finish the professional model. We just kept selling the littler model, because we could sell it for $500, which isn't that much less than what we're selling today. I mean, since the 80s. And of course, parts have become less money, so we can keep the price relatively low on that. But that's how it all started. And it was almost like anything I wanted to do basically turned around to being this technology-driven process. And I'm a big one. I love studying ancient traditions, like how do people relax? And what we really wanted to do at first was, how do we get people to relax how do we get them to relax and get out of pain? Because you only feel pain in beta. So beta is a brainwave state where we're talking right now. And especially if you're out there in the numbers and you're doing, critical work, those are left brain jobs, accountants, bookkeepers, people looking at those actuary charts and all of those things. That's very left brain. And that actually can, be bad for the body if you're already at arthritis or pain, because that produces a beta brainwave. We proved that, actually we've been proving it since the 80s, but just 3 months ago, I was in Brazil. We just had 3 studies where we beat out opioids in 3 different studies. This is what we wanted to do in the 80s, but when opioids came out, they said, we don't need this technology. We've got these pills. And now we find out that all these pills have caused all these problems. They're good for short-term use, but the problem is we get addicted. So
okay, so let's be clear here on this study. You did a study, was it like a double-blind study with the opioids and your technology, and they went head-to-head to see which one would relieve pain the best?
Yeah, and it was done in Visa, which is the FDA of Brazil. They actually paid $200,000 to run the study, because they also have an opioid crisis there. And one of the professors at the pharmaceutical college was really intrigued, because we have a device also called the NeuroCheck, where we can measure neurotransmitters and activity in the brain. And he said, I don't believe that. And we said, well, why don't you do a study on it? So we did. And the double-blind placebo-controlled study was exactly like they would do with a prescription drug. And the reason we did 3 studies is, I didn't realize this before, but every pharmaceutical study pretty much has 3 studies going on at the same time, because usually 2 of them don't work. And they need to have 1 work so they can get efficacy study done. So we all 3 of ours beat the opioids with significance, which means the pharmacy between your ears is much more powerful than the pharmacy on the corner. If we can get the brain to work for you and your body's innate intelligence goes to work for you, you'll minimize. And the big reason for that, we found, was opioids have a half-life, right? You take them and you're out of pain, you're in this euphoric state, but the more you take them, the more you need. And in the study, we didn't give them any more, because that's counterproductive. That forms addiction. So we didn't want to have addiction happen, but we wanted to see what happens. Now, obviously, they probably could have continued to take more and more and more, and then had a toxic poisoning or something from taking too much of the drug. And what we wanted to show was, this was in fibromyalgia pain too, because fibromyalgia is also looked at by a lot of medical doctors who really don't understand what's going on with the body. They think they do, but it wasn't taught to them. They think fibromyalgia is a brain thing. It's not. Fibromyalgia is the myelin sheath of the nerves get stripped away. And a lot of it has to do with statins and things that people are taking to try to lower their blood pressure, which is also not very good. We need that cholesterol in our bloodstream. What we need to do is lower our inflammation naturally, not with a drug, because it's really proving to be really bad side effects like neuropathy, pain, and all these things are happening because of it.
Wow, I'm speechless knowing that that's doing such great things. I mean, the only thing I can say is what I've experienced personally. Now, on our podcast, Patrick, we talk. It's all about accumulating, enjoying, and passing on your millions, your wealth, right? And on our outro, we say, remember, mastering your millions all begins in your mind and your team. And that's one of the reasons, listeners, that we've brought on Patrick, is your mindset has got to be correct. And tell us a little bit, Patrick, about the different wavelengths or wave states that the mind have, and what happens during those states. And then that's people start to understand, well, I see why they have him on their podcast, for the fact this actually could be a tool when you're attempting to amass millions, when you're wanting to enjoy your millions, and to have, you already talked about relaxation and good sleep, but let's talk about a little bit of different, the wave functions.
The main thing is people spend their whole life making their millions, then they spend their millions trying to stay alive.
Correct. Trying to buy their health back, right?
The old saying, people die at 27 but are buried at 76. We don't want that, right? We want to have a very active fulfillment. So the biggest thing here is your biggest money maker is not on a spreadsheet. It's not on a stock pick. It's in your brain. The 6 inches between your ears are the only thing that separates you from being a millionaire and being somebody who has to go live with their kids in the basement or whatever when you get older. Because when you plan ahead, there's something called long-term thinking. And most people in America, really around the world, I'd say now, we have this immediate gratification syndrome. We want it now, we want it fast, we want it free. And by the way, you'll take care of me in the future. Well, people that have long-term thinking, they are much more successful because they have delayed gratification. They've even done studies on this. So they call it the Oreo study. They gave kids Oreos and they tracked the kids that didn't eat the Oreos, and they became much more successful than the others. But what we did is we looked at things like Think and Grow Rich, for instance. There's certain principles there that almost every entrepreneur will read about because they're just like universal truths, like do business with positive people, things like that. Always have a plan, put a mastermind together, have your right team. What we did was, there's a saying in my book, you get what you rehearse in life, not what you intend. And what happens is when you rehearse it, could you imagine watching your favorite movie or TV show, nobody rehearsed it? Well, people are getting up today making business decisions without any rehearsal, without planning anything, and they just basically throw it against the wall, see how it works. They don't realize that the most powerful computer on earth is also between your ears, a 100 billion neural bit processor. It's always thinking for you, or it's thinking against you, depending upon how you set it up. The average person has 80,000 thoughts a day, 60,000 are negative. So one of the biggest things this does for a moneymaker is you have to know how to cut through the noise, just like we have to cut through the noise on social media, cut through the noise in the news, cut through the noise. We have our own noise going on inside our head. And there are certain things during the day. There's a big mental health crisis going on right now. Everybody's reading about it. I don't believe it's what they think it is. I think it's a physiological effect. Your physiology affects your psychology, meaning if you've given up your health and well-being to gain your riches, you're eventually going to have to pay the piper, because you have to have both. The most successful people, even in the movies, they always show the guy that's made the $1 billion. He's got his gym, he's working out, he's got his personal trainer, he's physically fit. Well, that's not reality. 99% of the people don't do that because they've given up, they've sacrificed their mind and body for wealth. And I don't think that's a very successful strategy. You might leave a lot to your family. I mean, if that's all your goal is to leave a bunch of money for your family, but you can also enjoy it along the way, right? I mean, I know you teach people to do that. So in the process of doing that, what happens is the biggest fear in the world today is not the fear of public speaking. That used to be 10 years ago. Now, because of cognitive decline, there's 1 out of 3 people are going to suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's. And it's just getting worse. It's not getting better. So the reason is, some people say it's because we're living longer. I say that's not true. Look at every ancient tradition on earth. None of them keep the knowledge of the tribe with the youngsters. They keep the knowledge of the tribe with the elders. That must mean that our brains were designed to work for us until we're very old age. They weren't designed to give out and put out. And we've proven this with BrainTap. We've proven even with 100-year-old people that we could improve their brain in 6 weeks with over 31% more neuroplasticity. So think of neuroplasticity as your brain's capacity to work. You know, some people go, I only make those kind of decisions in the morning. You've probably heard that from business people. Well, that's because intuitively they know you have the most energy in your brain when you first wake up. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we actually have a physiological dip in our body, which we drop in temperature 2 degrees. Now, the older we get and the more dysregulated our brain gets, the more that drop happens. That drives us to behaviors that could be negative, like eating sugar or drinking coffee or doing caffeine, and to get a lift when we have brain waves. So now we'll go through the brain waves so you can understand how they all work. Where we're at right now, hopefully you're still with me in beta. Beta is a reactionary brainwave. We need that to drive our cars, ride our bikes, do all these things, but it's not alone. It's not like these brainwaves work in a silo. They work together. We call it a symphony of brainwaves. So this beta brainwave is the part that we react to. And actually in the brain, we can measure such things as evoked potential. For instance, when somebody gets a concussion, this evoked potential is slowed down, which they can't manipulate with their mind, like HRV or heart rate variability or something like that. So we know the brain has a capacity to take information in, process it, and spin out valuable data. As we age, there's a brainwave called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. This is the one that has to do with cognition. It's also the one that under stress atrophies. So if you're listening and you've said to somebody, I'm having a senior moment, there is no such thing as a senior moment. What it is stress in the brain. In your brain, that stress caused a reduction of blood flow and circulation to the hippocampus, which allowed, think of it like you have a hard drive over there. It has all your information on it. But as soon as you request data from it, the power on the drive goes down. Well, the data's there, but you can't get to it because there's no power to the drive. That's what's happening in the brain with stress. As we move through the day, this gets worse. And so this, as people age, this brainwave atrophies. So what we did, like with those Think and Grow Rich programs that we have, we've encoded them to train the SMR brainwave, because you need that information when you're making business decisions. And most people don't know about brainwave entrainment because they think it happens by accident. Nobody's done it, but they've done a lot of research now that shows if we can get somebody into more of a beta alpha state, which the middle of that is the SMR. So alpha, think of alpha as that daydreaming state that maybe as a child you got in trouble because you're looking out the window playing baseball rather than listening to, the teacher talk about English or math. Well, the reality is that we need to disengage every once in a while to liberate our brain, which is 70% of our nervous system. If we don't, we'll be high stressed. And everyone pretty much knows you don't make good decisions when you're stressed. But right now, we are in a situation where everybody's running around in high sympathetic stress. That means fight or flight. They don't know it. It's kind of like that movie, I see dead people everywhere. They don't know they're dead. I see stressed out people everywhere and they don't know they're stressed because they think it's normal. They don't know what it's like to be out of stress. And
it's particularly bad for entrepreneurs, right? I mean, they have so much going on. I mean, the joke that I tell people all the time that it's great to be an entrepreneur. You only need to work half days. It's only which 12 hours do you work is the problem, right?
Right.
So this is a big issue, this stress. So I started to cut you off there. That is the stress for entrepreneurs. Go ahead, Scott.
I should say as well, like, especially when an investment's losing, this all kind of comes together. Well, I have got an options account, and every single time one of my options goes in the money or something, and I start losing big, it is hard to just settle down and be like, okay, my plan is still on track. I'm just going to let the numbers play out, or I'm just going to take the loss. And so I would imagine that that's what you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's the long-term thinking. Like if you react in that situation, And then that little dip happens, then you see this big gate, you kick yourself in the butt, 'cause it's happened to everybody, right? It's not something, but you don't want it to happen consistently. And if you're not using, we all have our own little algorithms, if you will, in our brain. We think things out. Even buying a car, for instance, if you really went back and looked at how you purchased a car, I could ask you those questions. I could find out your strategy for buying anything. Your brain has a strategy for doing everything. It might look at the car, likes the way it looks, gets into the car, likes the way it feels, looks at the price, has a conversation with the salesperson, says, I like that. So they have this visual, auditory, kinesthetic strategy. Other people might have, I talked to my friends about it. As soon as I got enough information, I could go out and start shopping for cars. Then I found 6 or 7 colors that I liked. Some people have more, strategies. So the whole idea is, when are you doing that? Are you actively doing that? Are you doing that on purpose? Are you doing that by accident? Because I can tell you right now, the most successful people on earth do it on purpose. They take time out to do this mindfulness practice to figure out how they can maximize their time, energy, and effort. Because if you can spend the 20% of your really, let's say, growth expanding processes and those 80% that's draining you, the 80-20 rule that we all hear about, that's very true in all of the world. And most people don't realize it because they and Stephen Covey's book is so good, where he talks about sharpening the saw, where he runs upon these 2 guys cutting down a tree, and he goes, hey, why don't you sharpen the saw? And they go, oh, we're too busy cutting the tree. Well, they don't understand, if they take 20-minute break, and I want to just share one research program we did that blew our minds. We did it with the 1%ers at Google and Microsoft. These were the top of the food chain, done with Julia Arndt, who is a peak performance expert. And we converted her program into a BrainTap program. She was already getting results. So I'm just going to tell you the increase when they added BrainTap. They got 19% increase in production by doing one 20-minute session in the afternoon. But the thing that they didn't know about was, these were the top performers. They had a 71% improvement in their depression score. They didn't know they were depressed because they were so busy being busy. That's what happens when people retire and expire. Their happiness score improved 41%. Their sleep score improved 46%. These are all documented. And when we're continuing on with that study, she's done it now 3 times, and those numbers stay very consistent. Peak performers forget about themselves. They think it's all external, so they're doing everything external in the world, and they're not getting into that brainwave called theta. That's the one right before sleep. Theta is the one that actually, when you engage it, it's the one that all the great inventors that you read about, Tesla, Einstein, Edison, Michelangelo, I would guarantee you they were dipping into that, because when you dip into theta, now each of these brainwaves too, when we're talking about mental wellness, each one of these brainwaves also instructs our gut. So even, I know this isn't a health class, but your gut actually produces all those neurotransmitters, not your brain. But your brain has to tell them to do it. So those brainwaves, for instance, when you have these addictions, like you find yourself doing things you don't want to do, and even though you don't want to do them, you're doing them anyway, that's usually a trigger by dopamine. Dopamine, people go, why are they still drinking? I thought, they're drinking, but they keep drinking because dopamine you don't get a satisfaction by doing the thing you are getting excited about. You get the dopamine by being excited about what you're doing. It's not about doing it. That's why people never stop. Those addictions are so hard to do, whether it be alcohol, food, drugs, pornography, whatever it is, the brain never gets the connection. Now, when you get into alpha, which is where we want people to spend a little bit more time, about 45% of their brain should be in beta, 30% in alpha. Alpha produces something called acetylcholine. This is the feel-good, happy hormone. When you see that guy whistling while he works and having a good time, I guarantee you we could put our EEG on his brain and we would see a 30% or more alpha activity. Now, if it gets to be too much alpha, you become attention deficit. So there has to be a balance. So, and then when you get to theta, you produce something called GABA. GABA is the most the most overprescribed neurotransmitter right now that they don't know a lot about, but they know it has something to do with sleep. 2/3 of the world isn't sleeping right now. And if you're not sleeping, your brain isn't detoxing, which means you're not making the best decisions. You're not making the best choices. So what I think is the best thing for a business owner, think about your investment in yourself. If you could sleep deeper, you don't need a lot of sleep. The misconception is in longevity studies, you only need 6.5 hours sleep. So if anybody's telling you you're not sleeping enough because you're an entrepreneur and you're only getting 6.5 hours, 7 hours of sleep, they're wrong. The reason that you're not getting the sleep is you're in bed for that time, but you're not getting sleep. You have to have at least 1 hour of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM sleep. And you can measure that on any device, from an Oura Ring, BioStrap, Whoop, all these different devices. Once you do that, you will find that you wake up with superpowers. Whatever you do well right now, you're going to do even better. And that's where we really excel, because when you get stuck in that beta brain, that stressed out brain, that worried about that stock option or whatever's going on there, your brain stays in that beta state and doesn't release. It's like a clutch. We need to release it so the nervous system can go back to normal. Unfortunately, people go to sleep, close their eyes, and then their brain wakes up. Now they're thinking about, oh, what about this employee? What about that deal? Did I close that process? We need to teach the brain, put the brain to work at night, not you. Your brain never sleeps. So there are processes that inventors have used, and I basically, in my reading and research, found that there are certain ways you can put yourself to sleep that get your brain to work with you instead of against you. And that's one of the things we train with BrainTap. And then we train in the morning to wake up the brain. We call it digital coffee, because although I do drink coffee, I don't drink it first thing in the morning. And some days I don't drink it at all because I don't need it. I just slept all night long. Why would I need a cup of coffee? But there are people out there that don't understand how the nervous system works, and they will drink a cup of coffee first thing in the morning. Worst thing you can do for your body. You want to have at least 2 glasses of water in the morning, and you want to have some mineral salts, because your brain shrunk 3/4 of an inch last night. And it did it because that's how it detoxes. And if you don't hydrate it, coffee, by the way, is a diuretic, which means when you drink 1 cup of coffee, you got to drink 3 glasses of the same size of water just to get back where you were. So when you think about brain health and brain fitness and taking your millions into the future, nobody wants to make $1 million so somebody, pretty girl, can take care of them, or some pretty guy can take care of them. They want to be there functioning as a fully functioning. Like, for instance, myself, I'm 62 now. I regulate all studies that they've ever done for me. I'm around 30 to 33 years old biologically. I'm not 62. But my biological system shows up like a 31 or 30 years. But I've been taking care of myself my whole adult life. I didn't abuse myself all the way through my life and then wonder why God didn't give me the great body when I got older. You've got to take care of it along the way. And that's what I think most people in business, they miss out on. They think that they can't take care of themselves because they're so busy being busy, and they need to sharpen that saw, and that's their mind. What can they do with their brain? Their mindset is the difference, but some people will give up their future in exchange for today. And I think there can be a good balance there, is all I'm saying.
Well, it sounds like to me, from an outsider, might be thinking that, wow, this is too much. There's so much I need to do here. The reality is, it's not a whole lot that you need to do. I mean, from a time point of view or effort point of view, right? I mean, let's say you're going to give some sort of recommendation, is that whether you had say you had a BrainTap unit, that it's like 2, maybe 3 20-minute sessions a day.
Yeah. In the morning, we always tell people the average person hits their alarm clock 3 times. So we say, don't hit your alarm clock, just wake up, do a 10-minute. They're only 10 minutes. They're AM programs. These are for SMR training. They engage the brain. We call them digital coffee because our body should naturally create norepinephrine, cortisol, and all these things we need to wake up. That gives you the same effect as coffee, but you can do it with your own biology. You don't need it. Now, at night, you don't even have to stay present. You can put the earbuds on or use the headset and go to sleep. It takes no time. So those two take no time, 0 time. Even if you woke up 10 minutes earlier, we have shown in studies that the rest you get from a 10-minute BrainTap session is equivalent to 3 to 4 hours of physical sleep. So you're going to catch up on that sleep. Now, if you can, on one of those days where you're really stressed out, like in the performance study, we told them only 20 minutes a day. That's all we need you to do to commit to the study. And we had them do it at 2 o'clock because of this, what I told you, the body temperature dropping. But if you're working on your own, if you take that 20 minutes, you're going to have 2 mornings. So think of all you can get done in the morning because you're fresh, your brain's clear, you're focused. You could have 2 of those, or you could do it right before you go home so you can be there for your family. I can tell you, I still go to my grandsons and granddaughters' sporting events, and I got to be present. I don't want to be falling asleep in the bleachers because I'm tired out. I will do a brain tap session before I leave for those so I can be fully there and present to be with them, because I plan to be with them for a long time. And I want them to see an energetic grandfather, not like I did. At the age I'm at right now, I remember my grandparents thinking they were old fogies sitting in rocking chairs and not being able to get out there. I'm the grandpa that says, hey, let's get on the boat, pull you behind the inner tube, and I'll get in there with you too. That's the way I think people should look at their future. There is no there. People think I'm going to do this for a little bit and then you're going to be there. No, a lifestyle change for health is forever. And I mean, even if you only slightly change your diet or whatever, you've got to do something for brain fitness. One of the best things diet-wise, though, would be to limit or eliminate sugar as much as possible. And to give an idea why that is so they understand it. As an entrepreneur, you get spikes of stress, right? Certain things happen, they stress you out. Well, your body has your liver. Besides its job of filtering out the blood and doing all these things, it has a lot of hormonal functions. But the main thing that I want to talk about is your liver holds 25 grams of sugar. And it's holding that as a backup generator, just in case a saber-toothed tiger comes around the corner and you got to run and don't get eaten. Well, if you have a stressful event like an entrepreneur and you're getting phone call after phone call, you're having to make this decision, that decision, that means that liver is constantly pumping sugar into the system. One of my favorite articles online that people have looked at millions of times is called Why Stress is More Fattening Than Chocolate. Because you don't need to eat the sugar to have the sugar effect. Now, you can either burn sugar or burn fat. Your body needs fat, but healthy fat, not potato chips and things like that, omega-3s and things like that. And your brain needs fat to process. So if you're a sugar burner, one thing, if you're an entrepreneur out there and you found, man, I'm really getting a really good business here, but I'm gaining weight like crazy, that's because you're not handling stress appropriately. You might not need brain tap, but you need something to reduce that stress. Get up and walk. That's why they said, like sitting is the new smoking. They've now proven that if you sit for more than 3 hours at a time, you've limited the oxygen to your brain up to 10%. So basically, it's worse than smoking. So
quick question for you, Doc. So are there other telltale signs? So if someone's gaining weight and can't figure out why, whether they're extremely active or not, are there other telltale signs where it's like, okay, this is meaning that I'm stressed out, and you can point to and be like, I need to settle down, or I need to do something different?
Well, one thing is if you find from time to time you stop doing a task and you don't actually know what to do next, you're so confused about what's happening, then there needs to be a priority process in place. But a lot of times your brain's just scrambling because it's so stressed out, it doesn't know what to do. It needs a break. It needs to disengage from that. One of the ways, if they're wondering, gosh, because this will lead to dysregulated brain, which leads to anxiety and stress, dementia, Alzheimer's. So one of the quick tools, if you can't smell peanut butter, believe it or not, you're 5 to 10 years away from Alzheimer's. And some people can't smell peanut butter. It's the weirdest thing. If you have an elderly grandparent or parent, have them smell peanut butter. And if they don't smell it, they're 5 years away. So they got to start doing something now. They should have done something, earlier, but that's one of the ways that we know in neurology that it's happening. The other is that just things you used to get you excited, that used to like light your candle and you'd be all excited about doing, you just don't have that feeling anymore. Because being in a high sympathetic state, which means fight or flight, you kind of rob your energy. Every cell has an energy store called mitochondria. And this mitochondria needs to be fed. And the most underprescribed nutrient is light. And most people aren't feeding their body light because we're working inside. So what we've done is we brought that light in through the eyes and the ears. So a lot of people will find that if you get hungry, if you get really tired after you eat, like you eat, you get tired, you've got to do something about your blood sugar, because that means your pancreas is working overtime. That liver is pumping out sugar all the time. You just ate, you already have a bunch of sugar in your system. You can only have 1 tablespoon of sugar circulating in your bloodstream at any one time. But when that tiger shows up or that stress shows up, the liver dumps 25 grams. So that then your body's it's gonna go into, we call it a glycemic coma. The body, you didn't eat Thanksgiving, but your body thought you did, because you put this food in, it didn't know how to react. So, we need to think of our bodies, especially entrepreneurs. If you really want to be worth millions of dollars and leave a legacy, you need to treat your body like a Lamborghini. You wouldn't put junk gas in it. You would get it maintenanced, and you take better care of it. Your body needs the same thing. I always tell people, if you want God to build a temple, you better bring the mortar and the bricks, because you got to do something. He's going to meet you halfway. He's not going to, a lot of people get older and they start thinking that something's wrong. Well, that something wrong happened 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when you started the habit of having a pack of cigarettes a day, or having even 1 drink a day. They now know shrinks your brain 3/4 of an inch over a year. And that doesn't seem like much, but that assault on the body, because it's sugar, that alcohol turns into sugar in the system and it assaults the brain. And so your body will do everything it can to protect your brain. That's the key thing here.
I was kind of waiting for Scott. We can edit that out. But so tell me.
I'm just wondering. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's great. Like
I don't know.
We need a break.
Yeah, we need a break. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. We need to kind of start wrapping this up.
Sure.
You talked at one time about the entrepreneurs need to invest in themselves, right? And I highly agree with that. And so there's 2 questions we like to ask everyone. Number 1 is, in the event that you could go back right now and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell that person?
I would tell them, do what you realized once you were about 40. Start putting aside that money that you were told to do, like the tithing that you do for yourself. The 10%. If you're going to give 10% to your charity or your church and 10% to yourself for investing. If I would have done that, I'm still in good shape, but I would have been much better shape, because for years I just thought, I'm going to do that later. I'm going to do that later. And as bizarre as that sounds, that's probably one of the biggest things I would say. Number 2 would be, don't sweat this small stuff. There's everything is small stuff. If you came into my house right now, there's always a quote we got it actually on our kitchen wall. It says, "This too will pass," because whether it's a good time or a bad time, right? Everything is temporary here. Take a moment to, love your family, your friends, whoever you're working with. Choose to be the person that you want to read about someday. And I think that's, when I was younger, I was like a lot of these entrepreneurs that are probably listening to this. They're just hell bent to make millions and, do their thing. And, you get caught up in that. And, what never will leave is your family, hopefully, and you have that close relationships. We need that. You read the Blue Zone theory. If you haven't read those books, you need community. We need community to really live a long and prosperous life. And at times I gave up my community in exchange for working so hard. So I work very hard to keep my community, which is my family and my friends here in my hometown. So I keep a connection here instead of, just disassociating.
Great. I love that. And coming back to your savings thing, one of the things that you're aware of is the learning to use a whole life policy as part of the infinite banking concept, and knowing, as that being a great place to store your money and sort of like a forced savings. I know that you've been involved with that for quite some time and are a proponent of that. Then second question is, what's the next mountain you're going to climb? And the reason we ask that is twofold. One is for you to give you an opportunity to put it out there. And 2 is then to make a commitment to us that when you climb that mountain, that you'll come back on the podcast and say, hey, let's celebrate together that I accomplished this. What would be, whether that's in 5 years, what's that next mountain?
Well, I think our next mountain is to open up the country of India. We have, I'm just getting an award actually tomorrow morning as the researcher of the year in India. I had 2 published papers on PubMed showing how something called pranayama breathing can do the same thing as brain tap, because I love studying ancient traditions and modern technology. And my goal is to better 1 billion brains. So I got to get into countries that have 1 billion people. And so, we're doing a good job here in America with our 4,000 clinics and doing their thing. And I think I've made arrangements to work with a company called the 9 Unicorns. If people look them up, they're going to find they're the second biggest generator of basically unicorns that is out there. They've now partnered with us to bring it out through India. Because you need to, in a country like India, you need to have the insiders, the inside scoop. And I think that we already have the universities there using it. I've been on many tours to India because we taught them how to use brain tap. And actually Ames Bhopal, which is like the MIT of India, they changed their neuro center now to the brain tap neuro center. And they put on the plaque donated by Dr. Patrick Porter. And all I did was give them equipment to do studies, but it's so changed the way they look at neurophysiology that they renamed their neuro center. And I think that's going to keep happening. We got a center renamed in Brazil too. It's called the Brain Tap Neuro Center down at one of the universities did the study. And we don't have to pay for those. We didn't pay for the building like a lot of people do. They did it because they know that our goal, they want to focus on our goal is to better 1 billion brains. And to do that, we need a lot of people to help. It can't be just Patrick, out there doing his thing. It's got to be everybody looking like helping their families, helping their friends. Your brain can change at any age. And I think India is a key for us making that. But, Asia or anywhere could be good.
Well, I love that. So when you open up India, I want you to text me and we'll bring you back on the show and have kind of a celebration. That's really cool. I love that huge goal of bettering 1 billion brains. And everyone that's listening, there in the show notes, there'll be a link to where you could get a hold of Patrick's company and everything and find out more about this brain tap. Like I said, I use it, Scott uses it, my wife uses it, and I know a lot of people around me that use it quite regularly. And whether that's to better their sleep or reduce their stress, or even to help them in better learning abilities at school that I've done with some of my kids. So thank you so much, Patrick, for being on our show. Scott, I'll give you the last word.
I'm not sure if anything else needs to be said. Patrick said it quite well. It always starts with your mind. It's however you perceive your reality, and that's how you change it. And so I would highly recommend that everyone does connect with Patrick.
Yeah, and you'll give them a link to get a free 14-day trial. If it doesn't work for you, just cancel before 14 days. It costs you nothing. The downside is you could lose all the stress. The upside, I should say, is you can lose all the stress.
So that's a special gift that he's given to our listeners since he's been on the podcast today, a 14-day free trial of it. So that's awesome. Thank you. We will put that link in the show notes, and in the event you want to take advantage of it, go ahead.
Great.
Thank you, Patrick. We do appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. And I do appreciate all you're doing with me, helping me with everything that I do, from money to just being there when I do events and I see you there. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.